There are a lot of misconceptions around what it's like to be awake, and one of them is that it's a permanent state of bliss. And it's not how I would define it, so I thought I would talk about this and sort of point to what the reality is of what it's like to be awake, or at least to be in unity consciousness. And and maybe where this idea came from. So I'll talk about what it's like on all levels, on the mind, emotionally, physically, what it's like, but also in relationships and day to day. So on the level of mind, I've talked in detail about this part of awakening with a video called Awake Mind. I will reference in the description the videos that I talk about in this video. So on the level of the mind is at peace. And that's because the mind has come to a still point. It is not operating in the same way as it did when the belief in separation was there. So most of the time, the mind is quiet. And so that feels like peace. And it gives you the experience of peace and quiet because the mind is not busy. It's not chattering away. So the mind can still be used as a tool to work something out or problem solve, but most of the time it's at a state of rest. And so that's very relaxing. So certainly not what I would call bliss, but I would call peace perhaps. So on the level of the mind, we experience that as peace and relaxation. On the level of the heart, I've got a video called Living with an Awake Heart that I'll reference, but it is when the heart is permanently awake. So the mind's permanently awake, the heart's permanently awake, and then you could say you're living from unity consciousness, where you're perceiving oneness. And when you're living with an awake heart, it's a state of ease and harmony. If you were trying to name emotionally how it feels, you can experience bliss, and you certainly do if we want to define bliss as a really heightened state of happiness around the realm of euphoria. You certainly can experience that, and you will have times of experiencing bliss, but your overall state is not one of bliss, which is kind of a good thing, I think, because it would be quite exhausting. If you've experienced bliss, you'll realize it's quite an intense emotion and not a way that you'd want to permanently be operating in the world. Instead, you're operating from the peace of the mind and the relaxation that's happening there. On the level of heart, it's a feeling of contentedness and harmony and happiness, basically. Happiness is a good word. So it's not happiness in the way that we usually understand that word of when something good happens to us or we get something and we feel happy. It's a natural state of happiness that's causeless, that's just there permanently, no matter what happens. That is your internal state. So would I say that being awake is a permanent state of happiness? I'd say that's a lot closer. Peace and happiness, certainly. But there are still some struggles that happen in life, and we can feel a certain way, and this is where things get confusing. So just because we're awake doesn't mean that nothing is going to happen to us in life. It doesn't get us out of life in any way. We still have to experience all the challenges of being in form, but we do it with a lot more grace and a lot more ease because our internal state is one of peace and happiness. So it makes life easier. It makes challenges easier to deal with just naturally, because that internal state that's from our empty center is allowing us to be able to operate in the world in a more harmonious and gentle and peaceful way. So it just makes everything easier. It makes communicating easier, makes relationships easier, it makes managing challenges easier. Your ability to cope is better. So it makes life better. It makes life easier. Will you still get challenged? Yes, you can't get out of that until you're not in form anymore. There will be illness, there will be pain in the body, there will be death and grieving and all of those. So any emotional state can still be felt, but it does nothing to rattle that internal state of peace and happiness that you have inside. So a different emotion can be layered on top of it, like grief, but it doesn't waver. That is, it's like a mountain of contentedness that's just your way of being from that moment onwards, from when you are permanently awake. So if we move down now into the body, the physical body has come fully online, and you can feel presence, and it's the felt sense of the I am in the physical form, which is a feeling of aliveness. It's a feeling of really being here, really being the body being awake. I'm awake and present. I'm fully here. And in some traditions, that is referred to as bliss. And so this might be where the misconception came from, not talking bliss as an emotional state, which is passing, but presence in the body is sometimes talked about as bliss. And in that case, I would say, well, then that is true. It is a permanent state of feeling that presence and aliveness in the body, where the body is fully awake and on board. So what suffering goes and what remains? Well, a lot of the suffering goes. What remains is physical pain while you're still in form. There will always be physical pain. And you will have difficult emotional states depending on what is happening in life. So if somebody close to you dies, you will still feel grief. How you process it will be quite different. How long it goes for, how long you're feeling bad for, that will be different. So it is quite different to when you're believing in separation. Emotions come, but they come in very intensely and they go very quickly. There's nothing that sticks here. It comes in and it moves through sort of like a wave. So it operates quite differently on an emotional state, but you feel very deeply and can feel any type of emotion, but it does nothing to change your inner peace and harmony that you have. So it is much easier to deal with whatever difficult emotion, and you have no resistance to feeling anything. You felt it all before, and you welcome feeling anything, experiencing any emotion. There's no pushing away. So what that does is it makes life easier, and there's no struggle with anything. You're allowing everything to just be what it is, even if it's something painful, even if it's pain in the body, even if it's grief, it's allowed to be there, and it's just felt all the way through and let go of. And that's that. So it's not a big deal. So anything added onto that, the internal struggle in the mind saying, this pain is never going to end, or fear of death, or fear of losing loved ones, and all of that inner turmoil is the suffering that goes. And so that's really wonderful to live like that. So you're really just dealing with physical pain and events that are happening right now in your experience, and feeling things very deeply, and you work through things very quickly emotionally. Overall, I would say relationships are very enjoyable when you're awake. You may have a lot less of them than you did when you were believing in the trance. Your life got simplified, and all of the things that weren't in alignment with truth were taken away through the awakening process. And so your life may have less relationships in it, but of a higher quality. And once we've worked through all the karma that was making the relationships difficult, then there's no drama anymore. So no karma, no drama. We are not attracting difficulties because we need to learn something or heal something anymore. Once we've worked through all of that karma, then we can just really enjoy relationships. So there certainly can be relationships. How many you have, how popular you are is going to be different from one person to another. But overall, they will be of a high quality, and you have a high level of emotional maturity when you're awake, and you're typically able to have very healthy relationships and operate in a very sort of adult way. Not everyone that is awake is capable of being good at relationship. It doesn't automatically equate to being emotionally mature, but typically I find most people that have gone through the awakening path have developed the skills to be able to have healthy relationships, whether that's with parents or kids or a loved one. We have found our way through the awakening process and healed the heart and have gone through so many things that allow us to have a healthy and loving relationship. So relationships really blossom when you're awake. So it's not a cold state where just because you can see that there's no people there and that you're dealing with just yourself, which is emptiness, it actually makes there more love there and a deeper connection in a way without that belief in duality, which doesn't really seem logical, but that's just the way that it's experienced. And so it typically makes relationships a lot better being awake. And day to day, I'd say life is more simple, and that's the way that you would choose to have it. So it's not a life of hustle, of success, of the next thing, of trying to be something in the world. All of that has been seen to be part of the illusion, and that's not something that you have any energy for, and no desire to go in that direction. And instead, you're in a state of peace, and it is a slower pace, and it is a state of being present through the day and being present with what it is that arises. How busy your life is going to be different for each person, but typically the awakening process has simplified the life to some degree or quite a lot. And a lot of things, a lot of responsibilities and things have dropped away in the process of awakening and left you with a life that is quite simple. And you're not wanting anything. You're very happy to just be present and just have the basics of life. You're very nourished by going for a walk outside. You don't need anything more. That's completely enough for you when you're awake. To the separate self, that might sound really boring, that life isn't dramatic anymore. Even sort of your social life, things like that can really die down. But when you're awake, you wouldn't want it any differently. You're at complete peace and very happy just sitting there or having a cup of tea or doing the simple things in life is all you want. So although it's not a state of what I would call permanent bliss, it is a state of happiness and peace and harmony, and it is really beautiful, and it's a great way to live and operate in the world.